Welcome to the third session of the carbon table.
EPR is purely demand and supply game, right? Today,
buy cheap products, which are
What does biodegradable mean? It means that
structure supply discovery process.
recycler for that.
of bringing in sustainable alternatives.
but is it practically recyclable?
So, hi everyone, welcome to the third session of the carbon table. So, today's discussion is focused on a challenge many businesses are actively navigating today. So, how to move beyond green claims and actually source sustainable packaging. So, for today's session, we have come in collaboration with Ramya.Materials. As you know, Fitsol works at the intersection of procurement, decarbonization, EPR, and Ramya.Materials brings us the deep expertise in sustainable materials, packaging validation, etc. So this session is designed to have a practical conversation between both sides. I'm going to play the mission live video, after which Siddharth will take over.
We are just a tiny speck in this vast universe. But are we sure the truth is only what meets the eye? Think again. This is our doing. We have plagued and poisoned Mother Earth with our selfish motives. India, known for large-scale behavioral change programs, has once again recognized the urgency and has led the global alliance with Mission Life.
मिशन लाइफ क्लाइमेट चेंज के खिलाफ लड़ाई का लोकतांत्रिक डेमोक्रेटिक एक प्रकार से उसका विस्तार कर रहा है, जिससे हर कोई अपने सामर्थ्य के हिसाब से योगदान दे सकता है। मिशन लाइफ इस बात पर भरोसा करता है कि छोटे छोटे प्रयासों का भी व्यापक प्रभाव हो सकता है। मिशन लाइफ हमें प्रेरित करता है कि हम सब अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में ऐसा बहुत कुछ कर सकते हैं जिससे पर्यावरण की सुरक्षा हो।
Revolutionizing general outlook, our Prime Minister envisions to change individual and community behavior to bring in significant impact on the environmental and climate crisis. Life's objective to take individual and collective action for protecting and conserving the environment. Looking to bring in paradigm shift, Mission Life envisions three core transformations: change in demand, change in supply, and change in policy. Simplistically put, Lifestyle for Environment is a mission to help you identify simple acts in our daily lives that can contribute significantly to climate change. The ideology is designed keeping in mind that the actions would be specific and measurable, easy to practice by individuals, communities, and institutions, and non-disruptive to ongoing economic activity, and in fact, promoting economic activity on the foreseeable future. So, let's take a pledge today and show to the world that we are environmental conscious and can lead the path for the world to follow. Lifestyle for Environment.
Great. So hope I could actually start or officially kickstart the session, Anjali, right?
Yeah, Siddharth, we can start now.
Great. So I think fundamentally, thanks a lot, everyone, for joining into the session today. It's been a bunch of interesting carbon tables or webinars, a combination of webinars and open-ended discussions that we've been having around sustainability and creating a business case for sustainability as such, right? And while we are considering we work with the industry, we thought an interesting problem statement that always comes towards us is the packaging side of it, especially on the extended producer responsibility or from the perspective of waste. And speaking of waste, ironically, I think an industry that has handled its waste the best way possible and weaponized it monetarily is the oil and gas industry, because literally look at every byproduct or waste that they've generated. They have found a way for them to create an infrastructure around it to monetize everything at an extremely cheaper cost, right? And to take to actually kind of change that entire infrastructure which has been created, I think after the World War started, it kind of exacerbated or catalyzed, but close to 70, 75 plus years of experience of plastic and other different types of products, which have gone deeper into every supply chain across your different industries, be it manufacturing, be it FMCD. And this becomes a critical aspect of it, right? And a large part of this is driven by packaging. Right. If you look at it from an FMCD perspective, you look at it from an automotive perspective, different industries, but the packaging side of things is always driven by cheap products, which are environmentally harmful. Which was the reason, Fitsol thought we are well placed because we work at the intersection of bringing in sustainable alternatives, which also create a business case to, throw an incumbent product away that is not sustainable. And while working with us, I think we found Ramya.Materials who are aligned with us on the vision part of it, right? Because a large part of replacing plastic or any type of packaging involves material level innovation, which is where companies like Ramya.Materials or someone like a Kavya, who's got her masters from Columbia in biotechnology, worked across companies like L'Oreal, worked on working with, say, something like textile waste and seeing how they can be that value chain can actually be much more sustainable on that aspect, right? So we have on one hand somebody from the material sciences end. On the other hand, we have our very own Amit and Karan. Karan, who's also been on the side of procurement, because a large part of packaging and products the business decision making lies on the hands of these folks, who have their own KRAs and KPIs to take care of, as opposed to sustainability. So for them, it's about cost, it's about ensuring the supply chain is kind of sorted. So for them, the complexity of the problem is viewed in a completely different lens, right? The reason why you can't see a sustainable packaging, because one, you do not know what are the terms, right from being it biodegradable to compostable to people calling certain things sustainable without any proof. For them to actually look at all of these, vet a supplier, and then onboard them at the correct cost and to ensure that they will give you long time, it's a massive problem for somebody who's managing. And you put this at the scale of somebody who's listed, right, who's managing 30,000 crore, 40,000 crore of purchase goods and services. This becomes a small component, and for the effort that they need to do, it becomes a very tricky process, right? And this is also one of the reasons why it becomes very difficult to move towards sustainable packaging solutions. I think we will also touch base with Karan on more in this regards. And along with Karan, we have Amit. Amit has been a veteran in the waste and EPR and managing that through recyclers, right, on the downstream part of it, right? I think nobody is better placed in terms of having the conversation on what happens once the product leaves the factory, once the product leaves the consumer's hand. How does that get recycled? Who are the people who are actually recycling it? What are the compliance documents that are required for it? And from an EPR perspective, which is right now moving towards a very strong compliance angle in India, there are different things required. So Amit brings that perspective into the conversation as whole. While I've given a overlying intro for each of the panel members here, this is going to be a free-flowing conversation with me just putting in few 2 or 3 questions for each of these folks. But I'll also kind of request each of them to give themselves also a small 30-second to 45-second intro, so that it makes it easier for others also to connect, right? So that is one part of it. So I thought I'll just open the floor with Kavya, Amit, and Karan. One of you can start, and then probably Kavya first, and then Karan, and then Amit. We can, officially start this conversation with Kavya herself first on one key problem, which I already spoke about in my introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Siddharth. So, starting with my introduction, hi everybody. I'm Kavya Batra, and I'm a material science consultant. A lot of my work has focused on packaging and bioplastics, and what are the implications of using these materials in this date. So, in regards to what Siddharth already spoke about, I'd like to set some context as to when we're looking at packaging, what do certain terms actually mean. It's very important to find these terms so that we can make the right choices. Because we hear them very commonly, but we don't understand the meaning properly most of the times. So firstly, I'd like to begin with the term biodegradable. What does biodegradable mean? It means that something something that's biodegradable will decompose in the environment over a particular period of time. This can range from 1 day to 1,000 years, but it basically decomposes in soil, and that's what biodegradable means. Compostable, on the other hand, is has can be divided into two categories. One is home compostable and one is industrially compostable, and that is usually where we see people get confused. Home compostable is something. An example of that would be a sugarcane bagasse tableware plate, which can degrade in your own home backyard compost. Whereas industrially, and the definition for that includes that it needs to degrade in soil within 90 days. Whereas something that's industrially compostable means that it will degrade, but it needs certain temperature conditions. Like it might need a temperature controlled environment, and it might degrade over a span that might be more than 90 days. So just wanted to do some context setting there. Uh, we also use the term recyclable very commonly. So what does that mean? It basically means that something can be a material goes back into production into the same quality. And this is where I'd also like to highlight another difference between recyclable and downcyclable. Recyclable is a product that, for example, a plastic bottle that you will go through proper segregation firstly, and then be made into another plastic bottle of the same which has the same quality. That is the exact definition of recyclable. But what happens usually is that whenever a plastic product is sent into a recycling facility, it is normally downcycled into a lower quality product. So that is these are just some terms that we need to keep in mind when we're looking for packaging and deciding which packaging we should choose. Because we would want to go for something when we're defining sustainable packaging, we want to understand each term.
Amit, thought I'll kind of segue into you here because Kavya has given a very technical, correct way of how each of these need to be perceived. As someone who goes into the industry and kind of looks like, when one of the vendors comes up and says to you, give me a sustainable packaging alternative. Is that what they have in mind? Because I know for a fact what they mean versus what they say versus what they need are three 180-degree things if you plot them on a axis.
Completely agree with what Kavya mentioned. That's absolutely right. So first of all, guys, hi, I'm Pachauri, and I've been in this industry for last 3 years, but overall, I carry an experience of almost like 25 years today, and part of business expansions in various companies throughout my career. As rightly mentioned by Kavya, the way people think and the way actually recycling happens, it's typically downgrading of a product, right? And gradually, when the granules are being built up, that is a different ball game altogether. The way recycling industry is currently working, right? So people assume that there's not much of a challenge, but there's a lot of challenges around it, and they don't understand the technical specifications or languages at times, right? And yes, as you said, what they ask for, what they look for, or what they demand for are altogether different ask at times. So that's a challenge in the industry.
Yeah, I thought very interesting. I think Karan, he's kind of put the folks on the procurement side of things there under the bus, stating you guys, at times it gets difficult when you guys are defining one thing and asking us to get you another, right? Just a small thought, point on that regards, because you worked on the other side also. So just thought, from your perspective, what does it look like, Karan?
Yeah, hi, I'm Karan this side. My background has been deeply rooted into packaging procurement, supplier ecosystem, and helping business translate packaging requirement into solutions that work not only toward the sustainability point of view, but also towards the commercial and the operational aspects. Throughout working in the manufacturing industry and the packaging industry, I'll say that I've been through multiple phases where I'm meeting people like procurement teams, packaging suppliers, I've been in the big and I've been the big seen that the biggest challenge is not finding the sustainable supplier or the sustainable option. It is basically practical implementation is something which is missing throughout. I'm looking forward to share my some of those realities and learnings from the discussion today.
Very true. I think speaking of, practicality, and the moment somebody hears practical, the first thing they think is cost, right? So, from a commercial standpoint, right, how does it look like, right? When does it start when somebody is coming to you and telling, hey, we want to move towards a sustainable packaging alternative, right? So how does it look like? Like predominantly when people think sustainability, they think it's costlier, right? While we've been proving that it's been the opposite way for on the different mandates that we've been working on. So if you can just, touch base on that aspect, that would be super cool.
I think this is probably one of the most common and practical questions businesses are dealing today. Very often, sustainable packaging conversation begin with comparing only the purchase pricing of the packaging, and that is usually when sustainable alternative seems expensive. But in reality, packaging should not be evaluated over the unit cost. It should be evaluated over the total system input, total system impact. What is the total cost of the operational cost? Everything should be involved in that. For example, operational efficiency, product protection, transportation impact, storage optimization. Multiple factors are there. Considering as of today in today's world, increasingly EPR consideration is one of the major factors which everybody has to go through. So in many situations, what initially looks like higher packaging cost may actually reduce the overall cost of ownership uh, through product damage and better recovery, improved recyclability, and process efficiencies. Second challenge is internal alignment, which is basically missing throughout the process. Procurement is mostly focused on the prices, operation is mostly focused on efficiency and the feasibility. And if we talk about finance, they only want the ROI to be reduced. They want a better ROI overall. So the conversation changes when we stop asking, is sustainable packaging more expensive? And instead asking, what is the total business impact in the packaging decision? Sustainable packaging becomes much easier to adapt once it is treated as a business decision, not only as a sustainable initiative. Lower packaging price and lower packaging costs are often two different things people misunderstand.
True. Great. I think thanks a lot, Karan. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head on a large parts of discussion that we'd be having here. Kind of came like a brief summary of an extended conversation that we could have, right? Just thought I'll take a segue from that. Probably I'll come to Amit and then Kavya, I have a extended question, which I believe Amit will be answering based on the next question I'm thinking, right? I think one part of it or a large part of why an extended producer responsibility was created is because a large part when there is consumption that happens, a lot of these companies, I mean, at least in the olden days, they used to run campaigns where they felt that the consumer using that is a problem and less about the person who's actually producing it, right? And then the governments came up with ways in the form of EPR to essentially hold the person who's actually producing it to be a responsible here, right? So, how does EPR classification factor into when a material is sustainability procured, right? Where does it come into the fray, or how does that work, and how does that connect to these things?
So, so that that's a question that comes across very frequently. That okay, what is it that they should use to actually reduce the EPR? Because that's today every brand or any company today who's a manufacturing any product, they take it as an obligation for themselves, right? They're not taking it as a ownership completely. That's one of the biggest challenges that is being felt around in the industry, right? Uh, when we talk about who should take the ownership, both I would say it has to be both sides. The end consumer has to take ownership as well as the brand who has to take the ownership, right, around it. When it comes to EPR obligation, yes, when we talk about sustainable packaging, yes, there are options available, and it can be typically looked at that how do we reduce the use of plastic some way or the other, right? Through sustainable packaging, right? It could be reusable, it could be decomposable plastic, whatever it could be, right? Brands are adopting these practices, but that would take slightly more awareness and time that would help companies to actually take a reduce the costing on that side. I'd say optimization, the cost optimization that would take.
Interesting you told that, Amit, right? What I wanted to connect, I think to Kavya also, I'll kind of go on next on the infrastructure part, because see, a large part of the recycling network, especially in India, is extremely disorganized, right? You have like look at Kabaddi Walas doing it. To an extent, it is also political, and certain pockets of spaces heavily political. So when companies are looking for a certified vendor, right, or when companies are looking for something that is practically recyclable, right? How do they go about it? Because suddenly you'll have somebody coming up to you and giving you one type of a document. That document might not even be the right one. Procurement managers at times might not be adept at looking at this. Then you do not know whether it's going to a sustainability head or to a compliance head to check these documents. And this entire charade is a problematic scenario, right? So, what are the kind of things that procurement teams kind of encounter, or how do they verify these aspects, Amit?
Uh, Siddhant, your connections, I guess my connections are weak or something that the question was not clear to me.
Yeah. So I was just trying to understand, or I was just communicating that when you're coming to sustainable procurement or EPR or those kind of things, you need valid documents, valid proof, which the procurement teams need to
Right,
have. In a market like ours, where
right.
waste is heavily disorganized, at times political, it gets very difficult to manage these, check the documents, verifying those documents, and all of these becomes a task, right? So how does one look at it in terms of verification? How does one look at it from a compliance perspective also? If you can just throw some light on it.
So, sure. So let's look at the basic level that how does this entire ecosystem in India works, right? So this is purely a rack picker model that has been there in India today. So when we look at L1, L2, L3 kind of segregation, if we do, right? So initially the material is being sourced by a local rack picker or a kabadi wala typically, right? It goes to aggregator then comes to a final bigger aggregator, and finally it gets sold off to a recycler. That's a system and mechanism that has been there, right? The challenge comes over here is that tracking and traceability is the biggest challenge in this industry, right? And that's what needs to be built up. Today, when the companies are asking for a documents or that are asking for a traceability of it, it could be only one level down, not below that, right? Because these things are being collected, sourced from some or the other ways, right, in the market, and then finally it's reaching to a recycling factory, which becomes a the product cost even for recycling becomes higher in that case also, right? So that's also a biggest one of the challenge for the recyclers to source the material. In case this can be sorted through some mechanism, which is like typically digitalizing the entire ecosystem of collection, then it makes more sense for recyclers also to, bear the cost of recycling and everything comes into picture. Today, the brands, companies do ask for tracking and traceability, but it's to one level down only. That's it, nothing else, nothing beyond that.
Yeah, so we will come back to that. I think at a later on stage, I have a follow-up to it, probably not right now. To Kavya is when I wanted to also look at it. When we were speaking with Amit, I think Kavya, being somebody from a materials background, you would have definitely seen how materials are created from grounds up, right? Or how they are recycled from grounds up. So taking current India into consideration, right? What does it actually mean when somebody say it's practically recyclable? And how should companies even look at materials in general, right? Because they have existing incumbent ones which are easier to acquire versus sustainable ones. Then there is a charade of problems that they look at. So can you just throw some light on when they say
Yes.
practically recyclable, what does it mean?
Yes, thank you, Siddharth. So basically, in India, recycling depends on a lot of factors, right? It depends on this if the segregation has happened well, if the machines that are supposed to separate the waste are working well, And if the informal waste collectors are educated about which plastic category is supposed to go where, is also a very important question that we need to answer. So I'd like to give an example of a black delivery box that we usually get for takeout when we order food. So most that has a number written at the back of it, which will classify what kind of plastic it is. So the waste collector needs to essentially understand if which type of plastic it is. It has a number written on the back, and send it to the right place in order for it to get recycled. Of course, even before that, we need to make sure that it's not soiled. Otherwise, like, that can create a lot of other problems. And then after that, when it enters a waste segregation facility where machines are being used to separate the waste, I guess it's very important that the machines are able to detect this container. And most of the times, black containers go undetected. So essentially, by definition, it's plastic and it should be recyclable. But is it practically recyclable? We don't really think so. So that's one example. Another example I can also think of right now is like a paper cup, which is lined with a PE lining. So when we're using a paper cup and we're throwing it in the bin, where are we throwing it? Are we throwing it in the compostable part or the recyclable part? If most of the times people don't even realize that it's a PE lining. So they're going to be like, oh, this paper is going to get recycled. No, it needs to be separated from the PE lining, and then only will the paper be able to be repulped and recycled. So a lot of thinking needs to go from like a material perspective to make a material practically recyclable and not just recyclable by definition.
Interesting. You've kind of told that, Kavya, right? Because uh, what you're essentially telling us is, see, theoretically it's possible, Siddharth. It's just that there is a plethora of reasons why it cannot happen, right? On paper, one, two, three, four, five things, once they happen, they are going to take place.
Yeah.
But there are plethora of reasons. For example, one thing which you've just told me right now is behavioral, right? People not even being able to segregate their waste across different things. But more than that aspect, thought I'll go deeper into the aspect of, say, getting into material selection on the production line, right?
Yes.
So, why do materials look good, right? On paper, I've seen a lot of, materials that can be created as alternatives, but on scale, it's just not possible once you're trying to execute it, right? So from a technical perspective or material perspective, can you just jot down, or why is it happening? Why is it not happening in a country like ours?
Yeah, I mean, it has to, like, okay, so I'll answer that question in two parts. First part is, what is an ideal material? What do we want to use? And when I think of that, in my perspective, because the segregation and the post segregation line that happens in India for recycling a product is so underdeveloped. So I like to think of a good product as something that we use once and it degrades at home, in home compostable facilities, because industrially compostable facilities are also not something that's available. So it should just enter your home, it should enter your backyard and degrade, or it should enter a landfill and degrade. An example that I can think of over here is that PLA straws. We know that PLA is industrially compostable, but like, there are papers that say that if, like, when PLA enters, like, is not composted in an industrially compostable facility, then it actually releases a lot of greenhouse gases. So it's actually doing more harm than good. And so that's how I would like to choose a material, is that I would like for it to get like a sugarcane bagasse plate. There's energy spent in obviously producing it, but once we use it, it literally just degrades. So there's an end of cycle over there. And then, sorry, your other question was that why doesn't it happen in India yet? And I think it's a lot to do with the infrastructure and the education of the informal waste collectors. Those are the two main reasons and points that we need to address in order for recycling slash good materials to enter the market.
Interesting that you said that, right? I thought, see, one thing which you've thrown back again is the business side of things, right? Which Amit and Karan, each of them are there to give a perspective on, right? Amit, I thought an interesting thing there was you need to create a market for recycling. EPR, extended producer responsibility, is kind of doing that in a way, in a sorts or the other, right? So how are EPR credit markets evolving in India is a conversation I wanted to have, because a large part of whatever Kavya is alluding to is creating that business case for these kind of things. And one aspect of it is how are businesses currently thinking about it. Second aspect of it is how can they future-proof their business, or what is the downside if they are not thinking the right way about it.
So, what Kavya mentioned, right, in the first case that, okay, there has to be marking and labeling that has to be done where the waste picker has to understand that. So that's typically, you're saying that you need to uh, teach or graduate these people into understanding that, okay, what kind of a material they are picking up and sending it for recycling or whatever they are selling off in the market, right? So government has already started that initiative of marking and labeling where they're saying that, okay, every brand has to typically mark and label the product that they are selling off in the market to the consumer, which should tell that, okay, what is the specification and what is the kind of plastic that is being used, right? That initiative already started, and brands are already putting that mark labeling on that product, right? So I guess that's again a point of awareness or education to society that, okay, it would gradually grow or have a knowledge sharing across industries for to understand these things. So that would take its own sweet time to happen, right? But the initiatives are being taken for that one, right? When it comes to your second point was around evolving the EPR market. Today, the market in India is growing rapidly at a CAGR of 10.8 or something percentage, right? And if I look at the market size currently in India for plastic EPR, it's somewhere around 2 point some bill to more than 2 billion, I would say typically, right? And this is going to grow because the use of plastic is not reducing, it's increasing again, right? That's where the options of sustainable packaging or decompostable packaging are being looked at, right? And that would help brands to actually reduce their liabilities or obligations from through EPR that they have to bear. I guess over a period of time, yes, that was going to happen. When it
Got it.
comes to recycling industry, again, they are also looking for alternatives for these.
Very true, right? I mean, Amit, thanks a lot for bringing that up. What we started with somebody like a Kavya who's talking about creating a market mechanism, and then you're saying the EPR is there, which is growing, which is now getting closer to a 16,000 crore, 18,000 crore market. But somewhere down the line, the adoption, which is the most critical part of it, still lies with a manufacturing player, right? Karan, an interesting, point from you, if you can throw some light on this, is two things. We know for a fact sales cycle and these kind of things go for considerable amount of time, especially when it comes to sustainable packaging alternatives that are sourced for incumbent solutions that are not so sustainable. The second part of it is, I think there are a lot of questions from a business side of things, right? Right from trying to understand where the material is coming from, whether it's eco-friendly or not. There are a bunch of things that they might ask you. So, how does this work from your angle when you're seeing it, when you're going out there working with these guys on sustainable packaging solutions or trying to sell the sustainable packaging solutions, right from a sales cycle to questions that are being asked to what do you think actually will move the needle from point A to point B for a customer to actually say, yes, I want this as a sustainable solution instead of whatever packaging I'm using. You're on mute, Karan.
Sorry. So I'll break down this question in two parts. First of all, about the reliability of the supplier if we talk about, as you asked, I think supplier discovery is one of the most underestimated part for the sustainable packaging as of now. In many organizations today, supplier selection will start from familiar vendors, quotations, and basic capability checks, which is normal practice throughout the industry. But sustainable packaging transition requires much more structured approach because of the decision impact, not only the cost, but also the operational compliances, scalability, and long-term visibilities. A structured supplier, I think, a structured supplier discovery processes should be ideally happen in stages. First of all, understand the requirement of the business. First of all, what is the requirement of your business? Are we reducing the virgin plastics, or are we improving the recyclability? Are we meeting the EPR norms, optimizing the cost? Secondly, I think to identify the supplier, the capability, is he capable enough to produce the material? Not only product availability is not the only aspect which we have to focus. The third is the valid technical and operational readiness. If he is ready to consistently produce the material on regular basis, is he can he scale over the period? So third point is the evaluation of the documentary and the compliances. This is what I think about the part where supplier has to be identified. And if we talk about how does the sales cycle looks when we talk about business, which so what interesting is that the sustainable packaging sales cycles are usually very different from the traditional buying decisions. In conventional packaging, as I told you earlier, that they only focus on for specific kind of evaluation process. For example, pricing, supply capability. But when the company is transitioning from sustainable towards the sustainable packaging, the company becomes more and more has to go more cross-functional. Typically, the cycle starts with the objective reducing the plastic usage, improving the recyclability, meeting the compliance requirement, or achieving the internal sustainability goal. Then it moves into supplier discovery, material evaluation, pilot validation. This is one of the most critical part. Supply pilot, or basically to cut it short, people generally don't resist sustainability; they resist the uncertainties.
Yeah,
Business,
true.
Sorry.
Yeah, please go on.
So business being asking questions like, will production line support this? Can the supplier scale? Will the packaging performance remain stable? In many cases, the project loses momentum because of the sustainability is treated as a procurement project instead of operational change project. Everybody wants to basically everybody wants to get the sustainable packaging, but when the business evaluates sustainable packaging, the objections are usually much more practical than philosophical. Most companies today already recognize the sustainable packaging becoming important, but they are trying to understand how to implement it without creating operational risks. First and probably the most common concern cost is the cost. Second is the performance. Third is the supplier reliability, and the fourth is the compliance execution. What I've noticed in the business daily move because of the sustainable message alone.
Yeah, very true, Karan. I think a large part of, at the end of the day, everybody's there to
So
maximize profits for the shareholders as well.
look,
So
claims in what I believe is that claim creates interest and proof creates adaptions.
very true. I think two kinds of proofs, right? One, Karan. One is, of course, on the aspect of the monetary aspect, supplier being reliable and being a strong alternative to an incumbent. But the second type of proof is, Kavya, considering you've come from a material background and the background in itself is very niche, but not a lot of your procurement guys. I mean, I don't know. I do not know. I can't talk about markets outside of India, but a large part of procurement guys do not come from a material sciences or that kind of a background, right? So when they are looking at it, when they do not know what this is, right? And as Karan had rightly pointed out, when there is uncertainty, it's very difficult, right? So they do not know about it, so they don't want to touch it. It's usually the kind of decision making algorithms that people use, right? So How should a business evaluate a supplier's sustainability claim, especially if they're not technically as savvy as a Kavya, which is very less number of people who can do what you're doing. So just thought if you can throw some light for the common man.
Yeah, thank you, Siddharth. So I'd like to answer this in two ways. Very in a very basic manner. First, you can think about, like, a consumer can think about, okay, what is the origin of this product, and where is this product going to go once it's been used, like the packaging. So, and that way we have category, and that is the way that we divide packaging into categories. Like, is the origin biomade, and is the end going to be biodegradable? That's the best case scenario. And then there are many permutations and combination to that. Like, it can be biomade, but it can't be biodegradable. It can be biodegradable, but like, uh, not biomade. Sorry, I think I just said the same thing. But yes, there are some certifications that we can look for, and that is the IS 14514, which tells us how many times a product can be recycled. So we can look for that. We can look for ASTM standards. We can look for DS 6400 or IS 17088, and this will tell you if the product that you're buying is actually compostable or compostable. So these are all international standards, and if someone is if someone wants to verify a supplier's claims or whatever, so then these are some international standards that they can look for. But I would go into it thinking deeply into, like, what is the origin of the product and where will it go towards the end. Because, okay, like, I'd like to give a very important example here, which is about craft paper. Right now, these days we see that blanket bags are all made of craft paper. So essentially, that's eco-friendly, another greenwashing term that people commonly use. And but if you think about where the source of this, like, how is this craft paper getting made? And the reality is that 70% of the waste paper that's used, because craft paper, sorry, to set some context, craft paper is actually recycled paper. So it's supposed to be a good thing, right? But in reality, 70% of the waste paper that is being used or pulped to make the craft paper is imported from countries such as the US and the UK. So what are the emissions of that transport? They're major, right? And so essentially, yes, we're saying, oh, craft paper, this is great. But where is the waste paper coming from? What is the source of this product? That's a very deep question to ask. And then, is it really solving the purpose that we're set out for? Is something that I would like each customer to think about, and is a material science perspective.
Very, very interesting. I think interesting point is you talked about certifications, you talked about how do people look at it, but you talked about it from a perspective of procurement, right? Thought, Amit, I'll go towards the other side, which is on the recycling and the circularity gap closure side, right? From an EPR perspective, Amit, right? Sustainable packaging would mean lesser obligations for a company on the EPR side of things, or that's how I think at it, or any layman might think of it. Is that the case? That is one point. And a large part of
Repeat. Your voice is
sorry. So I was just saying
signals are unstable, so you need to repeat.
Sorry. So I was just saying here, Kavya spoke about from a perspective of procurement. I thought I'll move on to the other side, which is from the perspective of recycling and circularity gap closure, right?
Right.
If I'm going for a sustainable packaging alternative, does it mean I have a lesser obligation on the EPR? Can I think about it that way is one question which I wanted to ask you. The second part of it is, I think EPR right now, India, a large part of it is driven by compliance folks, right? How much each of these compliance folks come in and have a say on procurement or sustainable packaging alternatives is still a big question mark. So how does that pan out in a country like ours, Amit? Okay, signal are bad. Is it only mine, Kavya or Karan? If you guys are fine, I thought I'll move to Karan if it's fine with you, Karan.
It's fine with me.
Great. So I think
So I just, I'll just add on with what Kavya was saying. I was just going when I was listening her. There was a time when I heard about something that to produce 1 ton of paper and to produce 5 ton of plastic. I think recycled paper. I'm talking about the same recycled craft paper you're talking about. I think it has the same carbon emission produced over the period. That is what I've heard a long time back. I'm not sure
Yes.
whether it's right or wrong, but as
From
much as I understand, craft paper, I guess one produce to produce 1 ton craft paper emits almost the same amount of carbon emission when we produce 10 tons or 5 tons of plastic, if I'm not
Yes.
wrong.
Yes, Karan. So you are actually right, and that brings me to such an interesting point, actually, and which leads back to why plastic was actually made. Plastic was made because of this reason, because like it uses lesser energy to produce, it's reusable, and it can be reused multiple times. So that was the intention with which plastic was first produced, and now we have taken it into single use plastics, no recycling facilities, and it's just like
That is the problem.
something that is such a beautiful material. If you think about it, it gives us like
Yes.
90% of the products that we currently use. It's from a material science perspective, actually plastic is a great material, right? It can do almost anything, it's almost magic, but the way that we treat it, it's very disappointing.
It is still,
So
what I
yeah, you
believe is,
got
it
me
is
on a
still
tangent there.
unexplored. I still believe plastic has so much capabilities, it is still unexplored.
Fascinating. Yeah, Amit,
Yes,
are you
yeah,
back?
I'm there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, I think Karan and Kavya were having an interesting conversation on plastic and how it is, right? So Amit, what I wanted to ask you, especially from the perspective of EPR, right? A large part of EPR is driven by compliance folks in India. And when do they get to have a say when products are procured as a sustainable packaging alternative? And how does, say, if I am procuring a sustainable packaging as opposed to a plastic, right? What does it mean for me as a company when, from a business perspective, how is that impacting the business decision making right now in a country like ours?
Okay. So, when we talk about sustainable packaging, right, companies are moving towards that, and when they are procuring any material for which is like sustainable packaging, they need to have a declaration from the recycler for that, right? And the which is like typically a PCR, which is a post-consumer recycled product that we are talking about over here, right? That declaration has to be done. They have to certify, okay, this is the amount of material that is like typically PCR material that has been used in this packaging material, right? And when it comes to compliance management, right, they start from the beginning, but when it comes to EPR, they look wait for the end of the year for that. That's the irony.
And what is so when they do that, right? What is the net biggest problem for them? Because they come to you last second. So from a financial perspective and compliance
It's,
perspective,
it's,
where does
it's
it take them?
EPR is purely demand and supply game, right? Today when we are sitting in the month of May, which is end of May typically, and the deadlines are for 30th of June. Now companies are rushing to fulfill their obligations. If they would have started from the beginning of the year, financial year, right, the demand would have was already there, but they never procured those EPR credits from the market. Now the rates are shooting up, right? That's a challenge, right? And then it's like typically the amount of credits available are lesser in the market. So that's where the obligation doesn't get fulfilled on time. That's again the biggest challenge in the market today.
Fascinating. Great. I think a very, I mean, for a layman, it's a very jargony conversations to an extent, is what I thought. Right from Kavya to Amit talking about EPR to Karan talking about the procurement or the business side of things. I mean, truth be told, have even for people who've been in the sustainability space, these terms are used interchangeably at times, and which is also the reason why we thought, why don't we, break this down for folks in a form of a document which we combinedly did with Ramya.Materials, right? The thought process here is to break down this jargon and ensure there is more awareness creation from a perspective of EPR, sustainable packaging, procurement, and those kind of things. I think Anjuri from the marketing team or the comms team has dropped in the document for people to view. For those of you who've registered, we'll also ensure that we send it via mail, if I'm not wrong, Anjuri. So please do have a look at it and let us know how this kind of pans out, right? So thought I'll give a heads up or a shout out for that as well. Thought I'll close this particular thing with one final question to all three panelists, right? Probably we'll start with Karan. Karan, for more adoption to take place, right? For India to move towards this sustainable packaging goals and those kind of aspects, right? What are the two main things you think is required? Let's do it like a fatafat question and answer, so that it becomes easy and this thing. I think, did we lose Karan?
There's a network issue over here, Siddharth.
Cool. Amit, then you're great. You go for it.
So come again, I didn't hear the question.
So I was just asking for India to move towards a much more sustainable packaging and EPR compliant and circularity country. What is the one thing, two things that are mainly required in the market right now?
Use of recycled products.
Got it. That is one.
Right. So that's the one basic thing that has to start, right? And the reusable packaging, right? Typically, that the way we guys are working towards reusable packaging, that has to be one of the option that has to be explored at a larger scale in the market in India today.
Very true. Okay. Kavya, if you would like to take a dig at it.
Yeah, sure. I would like the appetite for newer materials. I would like people to accept newer materials, something like a mycelium packaging. Uh, that's so that's such a great thing to do. So I'd like that people to accept that, and I'd also like development in the current infrastructure of recycling facilities. So that's two things.
Great. Karan, do we have you back here or? Cool. I think we kind of have lost Karan on that regards. Thought we'll take a step
Signal
back.
issue.
Yeah. Thought we'll take a step back here. We will open the floor for one or two questions if feasible. If Karan comes back, we could probably ask him. But thought we'll just open up the floor for anybody to ask any questions on this regards. For any of the panelists, happy to pick it up. Anybody? Do we have few in the chat? I do not think there are. Cool. I think Anjali, the discussions are done. Over to you to give the signing remarks.
Yeah, so thank you, Siddharth, and thank you, Kavya, Karan, and Amit for that really meaningful session. It was, I think, a great conversation. A little bit more about the guide that we've put together. This is a joint resource by Fitsol as well as Ramya.Materials. So we'd love it for everybody to. I mean, this is for you. You can please download it and go through it. We'd love your feedback as well. We will be posting a recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel too. And if anybody has missed it or you want to send it across to someone, you're more than welcome to. We'd love it. So thank you so much for joining us today and have a great week. Thank you. Thank you, Siddharth, Karan, Amit, as well as
Thank you,
Kavya.
guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.